For decades, it's been the war everyone's been talking about, but the one that never seems to actually happen. A shadow conflict, fought with sanctions and proxies and covert strikes. But what would happen if the shooting finally started? Today, we're going to break down the war between the US and Iran that hasn't happened. At least, not yet.
Okay, to really get our heads around this, I want you to picture something with me. Let's imagine a not-so-distant future. The year is 2026, and that long simmering tension has finally and violently boiled over.
The date is February 28th. In the hours just before dawn, the sky over Iran absolutely explodes with light. It started. The war has begun.
They're calling it Operation Epic Fury, and it is massive. We're talking a coordinated storm of U.S. and Israeli airstrikes hammering Iranian military sites, command centers, you name it. The goals? Well, they're incredibly ambitious. We're talking about crippling Iran's missile and nuclear programs for good, and maybe even forcing a regime change. Then, just hours in, a shockwave hits the news. Iran's supreme leader has been killed in a strike.
Iran's response? It's immediate, and it is overwhelming. Hundreds of ballistic missiles and swarms of attack drones are launched. And they're not just aimed at Israel. They're targeting U.S. military bases all across the Gulf, in Qatar, Bahrain, Iraq, Jordan, everywhere. The retaliation is incredibly swift and absolutely ferocious.
And just like that, the war spills across borders. It's chaos. Civilian infrastructure is getting hit alongside military targets. In Lebanon, Iran's most powerful proxy, Hezbollah, opens up a whole new front against Israel. And then comes the move everyone feared. Attacks begin on oil tankers in the Strait of Hormuz, that tiny critical waterway for the world's oil supply.
And this chart right here shows you exactly why this suddenly matters to everyone, no matter where you live. But the world's energy lifeline under attack, the oil markets just panic. Gas prices go through the roof all around the globe. Suddenly, this regional war is hitting people in the wallet thousands of miles away.
So, the world is on the edge of its seat watching this catastrophe unfold. But, hold on a second, let's just pause right there, because we really need to talk about what's actually going on.
What if I told you that this entire scenario, as terrifying and frankly as plausible as it all sounds, hasn't actually happened?
Because it hasn't. That entire 2026 nightmare, it's a hypothetical. It's a projection based on very, very real analysis and incredibly high tensions. But as of right now, today, there is no declared war between the US and Iran.
And that brings us to the real question here, the one we're really trying to answer today. If they're not in a shooting war, then what exactly is this conflict that's been going on for decades? And to get that, to understand today's brinkmanship, you have to go back in time.
So how did we get to a point where that scary scenario seems even remotely possible? Well, this didn't just pop up out of nowhere. The roots of all this animosity, they run deep. We're talking about 70 years of built-up mistrust.
And this timeline, it really lays it all out. The story kicks off in 1953 with a US-backed coup. That's where the deep-seated mistrust from the Iranian side really begins. Flash forward to 79 and bam, the Islamic Revolution and the US hostage crisis. Relations are completely severed. The hostility just hardens over the next few decades. Then you see this brief little glimmer of hope, right? 2015, the Iran nuclear deal. But that falls apart just 3 years later. And then in 2020, a huge moment. The US kills General Qasem Soleimani. And honestly, the two countries came closer to all-out war than they had been in a very, very long time. It's just this relentless cycle of confrontation.
So, if it's not a conventional war, what do you even call it? The reality is something more like a state of permanent conflict, one that's just fought without formal declared combat.
Now, this is a really helpful way to see the difference. On the left, that's what we all think of as war. Armies, invasions, direct fighting. But look at the right. That is the reality of the US-Iran relationship. It's this prolonged confrontation fought with a whole different set of tools. Crippling economic sanctions, sophisticated cyber attacks, targeted assassinations, and maybe most importantly, proxy warfare.
And this whole idea of proxy warfare is absolutely Iran's specialty. It's their go-to move. See, instead of taking on the US military head-on, which would be disastrous for them, they get someone else to do their fighting. They fund, train, and arm groups all over the Middle East, groups like Hezbollah in Lebanon or militias in Iraq, to go after US and allied interests on their behalf. It gives them influence and, crucially, a degree of deniability.
So the big question is, why hasn't this shadow war ever turned into a hot one? Well, the simple answer is that both sides know a direct war would be absolutely devastating for everybody. Iran knows it can't win a conventional fight with the US, so it sticks to proxies. And the US, for its part, really wants to avoid getting bogged down in another massive Middle East war, so it prefers sanctions and targeted strikes. It's like each side has a strategy designed to go right up to the line without ever actually crossing it.
Which brings us right back to our opening scenario. Both sides have managed to avoid the ultimate escalation, but they are constantly walking right along the brink of war. So what is the calculus that keeps them teetering on that edge?
So here's how analysts think policymakers might weigh this decision. On one side of the ledger, the potential goals for U.S. strike look clear, right? Stop Iran from getting a nuke, protect allies, secure those oil routes, and weaken Iran's network of proxies. But then you look at the other side of the ledger, the risks, and they are just catastrophic. A massive regional war, a global oil shock, devastating attacks on U.S. troops, and the nightmare scenario of another costly, long-term occupation.
And that's why, time and time again, the conclusion is the same. The expert consensus is pretty clear. The potential costs of a full-scale war would almost certainly outweigh any of the possible benefits. It would be a strategic failure with truly unimaginable consequences.
So we're left with this incredible paradox, a state of perpetual conflict that has somehow managed to avoid becoming an all-out war for over 70 years. And the central question remains, in a region this volatile, with tensions always simmering just below the surface, how long can an uneasy balance like that possibly last?